think my story is one of seizing opportunity, whether it was with the family business back in Oregon or exploring Australia as a young adult, or taking the opportunity to say yes to Steve when he suggested we get married and start on this adventure. So I feel very blessed to have had these opportunities, but it's always important to remember that you need to seize them and say yes. I grew up in a family business when I was a little girl, and it was fabulous. I loved it. It was like, looking back, I was a little entrepreneur. So I loved that my dad involved me in things and would ask my opinion. So like every kid growing up in Oregon at the age of 5, I had a lemonade stand. My dad was my best customer, and I sold a lot of lemonade for 10 cents, and it was wonderful. And then I got to thinking, if I had the kids on the next block also sell lemonade, and I let them keep 5 cents, I could make more money without being in more places, and without knowing it, managed to franchise at the age of 5 and made more money and had a bigger experience with my lemonade sale. And I was really glad that my dad, as a business person, encouraged me to go for whatever I wanted to achieve. He was one of those dads with many different jobs for many years. He was a police officer, and then he got into heavy haul truck driving, so he was on the road a lot. He'd bring home little hurt animals, and we'd fix them up and then release them back to the wild. So growing up, I had a real love for wildlife and a real passion for business, and was lucky as an adult to bring the two together. I think doing wildlife conservation work was something I was very passionate about and sort of fell into. As a young adult in my early 20s, I was reading the newspaper, and in the pet section, someone was selling a cougar, of all things, a young cougar cub. And I thought, this is really strange. How could this be right? So I went to the place and saw the cougar cub, and she was about 3 months old and in really rough condition. She had swollen joints from the beginning of rickets, and the fur was all worn off her forehead from trying to get out of her tiny carrier. And I felt really bad for her. And I reported the situation, and they said, it's interesting, but I can probably get to this in about 6 months. And I said, all due respect, but in 6 months, this animal will have passed. It's in pretty rough shape. So I scraped together all my money. I got $1,300, and I bought this cougar. And her name was Melina, and I took her home, and I was so glad that I could save her. So she got her own special area in my backyard, and I would take her to school groups and different events to talk to children about wildlife. So educating children became part of my passion. And then I began working with more animals that needed help, and mostly wildlife. People would bring me something that was sick or injured or orphaned. So I started an organization called Cougar Country, and was by then running the family business, and that afforded me the ability to help take care of animals. So I had about 100 staff and a little over 100 volunteers working with the wildlife side, and was able to save about 300 animals a year, and kind of steered me in a direction that would affect the rest of my life. Well, in 1991, some friends of mine were coming to dive in Australia. So I just came along to see the wildlife and experience Australia. And one day we were driving back to Brisbane, and someone said, there's a little reptile park here. Do you want to have a look at it? I know you like animals. And I thought, you know, it's going to be this sad little place with a few snakes in jars, and I don't think I want to stop. And then I went, when am I ever going to be here again? Let's pull over and have a look. So we walked into this very unassuming place that opened up into beautiful gardens and roaming wildlife. And there was this man talking about crocodiles in a way that I'd never heard before. He was talking about crocodiles are beautiful mothers and they're quite affectionate to each other, and giving attributes to these animals that I'd never thought of before. And so I stayed on for the next crocodile event and got to talking to him. And we just really sincerely hit it off immediately. I remember he asked me, "What's your favorite animal?" And I said, "I work with cougars in America." And he said, "Why? Why is that your favorite animal?" And I said, "That's really interesting because no one's ever asked me why." But I said, "I love cougars because they can overpower an animal bigger than themselves with only their mouth. Isn't that incredible?" And Steve said, "Oh, that's what I love about crocodiles." And I thought, well, this was a match made in heaven. And we hit it off immediately. And that was the beginning of almost 15 years together. It was very special. I love these photos. This was out, we were actually studying parentes and found this little guy instead. It's kind of like he's still here, and while I get older, he stays the same beautiful face. I think destiny is an amazing thing. I think we can ignore it or embrace it. And certainly when things happen, if you don't follow through, you may miss out on a wonderful, wonderful circumstance. The family opened Australia Zoo in 1970. It was called the Birwa Reptile and Fauna Park. So they loved rehabilitating wildlife, had some kangaroos and a few reptiles, and by charging, 60 cents admission, they could cover some of their cost. But when Steve and I married, it was really important, I think, to get the message out. Steve had such an incredible gift with wildlife, and filming was a way to bring the message to a larger audience. And I think when we started filming, we thought it was going to be a one-off documentary. It ended up being a series and then taking off in America and finally the world. And very early on, we made a deal together that whatever we made through filming and merchandising, we would put back into conservation. And so we have stuck with that to this day, and it's been an important component of the philanthropic work that we do here at Australia Zoo.
I am a wildlife warrior, and I'll fight to the death for wildlife.
It was important for Steve and I to look at the big picture of wildlife conservation. Together, it was a lot easier than if only one of us were interested in that mission. So we worked on a real holistic approach to purchase and protect habitat, as well as working with endangered species breeding programs and protecting entire groups of animals, and then opening a wildlife hospital to protect each individual animal. I'm so glad he's getting the help he needs. He's beautiful.
Yeah.
And he would live for many more years, hey?
Yeah.
So if we can get him back in the
He's
ocean.
Middle-aged, I'd say, so
Yeah.
he's got a lot left.
Steve and I worked together really well. He just treated me very much as an equal. And in the 1990s, we hadn't been, long out of still working on the glass ceiling with women, and people would often say, "Does he make you do that stuff?" Or "Isn't it nice he lets you do that stuff?" And I never had that feeling. I thought it was especially wonderful as a woman to be treated the same as all the other guys. And of course, I was already very comfortable with running a business, so I could step into different roles. Steve's passion was as a storyteller. He had great vision with building, and my passion was in marketing and business and really running things. So we worked very well together. And I remember Steve used to tease me when we got married because He said to me, "You're better looking than I am and you have more money than I do." So when I sold my business and my house and moved to Australia, I was able to then help expand the land here at Australia Zoo. So the zoo literally started growing with my ability to invest, and then we grew everything together from there. But it was kind of funny. It wasn't terribly traditional, but it was nice to be the woman in the relationship who could bring so much to it. So I was very proud of that.
It's going to bring a giant influx of tourism. It's going to increase employment at Australia Zoo by nearly 100%.
Really, it went from 2 acres to now over 700 acres. We went from 2 full-time staff to now over 450 staff, and we have well over 100 volunteers that work on a regular basis as well. So the sheer size of it all has grown gradually. We reached capacities of over 10,000 visitors a day.
And I'm not stopping, mate. This is just the start. Look out, here we come.
It started to hit home that we were reaching an international audience with the documentary series, The Crocodile Hunter. And we would travel to the United States, and it was really overwhelming the amount of people who were interested in what we were doing. And we were driving from one point to another, and the car was engulfed by people to the point where we couldn't move forward anymore, and they had to get New York mounted police officers in to help disperse the crowd. And that was an important defining moment, because when someone who might rather watch the footy than a documentary, to be so keen on Steve's work was truly an achievement. So experiencing that was jaw-dropping and very heartwarming, that everybody was on board with Steve's mission and his message, and it was an incredibly special moment in time. We were doing a documentary called The Ocean's Deadliest, getting people to understand more about some of the more special but scary animals in the ocean. So we decided to divide and conquer, and I took the kids to Tasmania, where we were working with Tasmanian devils. So we were in Tasmania when we got word that Steve had an accident on the reef, and of course Steve was mortally injured. So then began the task of telling my kids and getting us all home, and begin just dealing with everything from there. And I think just the effect, losing Steve, the effect that it had on the world was something that took me a while to get my head around. And I found myself in the unusual situation of figuring out how to deal with things going forward with the zoo, because Steve was on everything in the zoo. And I found myself in a moment of very poignant grief, actually needing to comfort others. Everything about it had to occur on a bigger stage, if you will. So that was all very challenging. I'm a person who's accustomed to running my own business, but suddenly I had lost my soulmate, my sounding board, the person who was the reason we filmed. So for 11 years, we didn't film with Discovery, and it was a bit scary because a lot of our income came from filming to support the zoo. So it was time to, drive the ship and just try to keep it on course to our true north. And whatever challenges and obstacles came in the way, we would just then redivert back to our true north. Some of the challenges really started probably with the GFC. What was that, 2009? Then, of course, the flood situations were so catastrophic in 2011. I had a lot of battles with conservation issues. We were trying to prevent the Steve Irwin Wildlife Reserve from being mined. So I'm very proud of that one. And then moving into closer to home times with the pandemic, when we were closed, we didn't know how long we'd be closed. And our bills just for caring for the animals were $80,000 a week to take care of the animals. It kind of felt like I was the pilot of a plane that could be going down. And the only way I could keep the plane from going down was putting parachutes on people and saying, you gotta jump, and I hope you land safely. It just kind of felt like that. It felt like you do the most dramatic things to try to keep everything just going along. I completely changed my business plan during COVID. A friend of mine in Las Vegas, who's a very successful entrepreneur, said, if you use this moment in time as an opportunity, not only will you survive, but you will thrive. If you throw in the towel, you will never know what might have been. And a lot of people didn't have a choice. But we were able to reimagine what we did as a business. And I was just very, very proud of being able to get through that. Not one of our conservation projects ended. Not one of them. And we've got about a dozen from Africa to the Americas and everywhere in between. So I'm incredibly proud. Everyone worked so hard. Outside of losing Steve, this was the biggest challenge for the zoo and the biggest triumph coming out the other side. Queensland is probably the best place to do business. We're a great community here in Queensland, and really, there's nobody you can count on more. If something happens, everyone pitches in to help you out. It's very heartwarming. So I think as a mother, we find it takes a village to raise a child. It takes your own associate community to run a business as well. And so very much my leadership role is roundtabling ideas. If you're running a business like a dictator instead of like a board, it's gonna have a lot more problems. But this sense of family, whether you're a family-run business or not, is really important. Here in Australia, more than 50% of businesses are family-run business. And I grew up with that. So I love that my dad involved me in things and would ask my opinion. And I think his ethics and his manner of running the business and teaching me to run the business, I've been able to pass on to my kids. And I can't tell you how lucky I am to have my kids involved, because now they're adults and Bindi has her own little girl. And every day, we're working together as well as being together as a family, and our extended Australia Zoo family is very much that. I think it's really important that you're always moving forward. And I remember my dad used to say that to me. It doesn't matter how fast you go, you just don't stop moving. If you stop, you're done. So with our goals, there were things that Steve wanted to achieve. And as part of his legacy plan, we've been continuing to achieve those. And in the last 3 years, we've achieved things that I never thought were possible. For example, opening the lodge. And even my accountant said, probably investing $10 million into something right now is not terribly smart. And he's a really good accountant. But as the entrepreneur, you have to be a little risky. And I'm really glad I did it. And I'm really proud of everyone. So this is the infinity pool here at the Crocodile Hunter Lodge. And it was really fun to integrate a little bit of Robert into this pool. So he took some photos of a couple of our crocodiles that live at Australia Zoo, and the tile makers put them into the pool as features. So ordinarily we tell people don't swim with crocodiles, but here you can, and it's really fun and beautiful. The responsibility I have right now is how we're going to grow Australia Zoo without growing too quickly. One of the biggest traps for any business is growing so fast that you fall over. So it's highlighting particular issues, and it's highlighting the needs of the animals. So what my goals are, looking towards 2032 and the Olympics, and being very well positioned and planned for accommodating pre and post Olympic travel. And I'm really proud of being able to take on more conservation projects and expand those as well. The research work that we're doing is very important, and right now 33% of our scientists are women, so I'm also very much encouraging women and young girls to get into science. We have a lot to learn, and there's this never-ending capacity for growth, but it's smart growth. So as you go ahead, you have to have the courage to step outside your comfort zone and try something, and always revel. Don't forget, you tend to achieve something and then just go, I achieved that, now I've got all this other stuff I have to do. Just revel, just say, but I did that. You know, I can't save everything, but we saved the Steve Irwin Wildlife Reserve. I'm just gonna revel for that one. And I think that's really important. Sometimes I talk to people who say, you know, it's tough getting old, and I go, are you kidding? I'm just starting to get the hang of it, man. 58 is great, mate. I'm just starting to figure it out, you know? I'm at that sweet spot between really knowing stuff and drooling in my soup. I get the hang of it. So yeah, I'm loving life right now, and I'm feeling very lucky. Yeah, it's good.